It felt great to be out there. I just feel like it's been a long process, so you're like building up to the moment, and then like just to go in and try to help my team. Obviously, you want to come out.
The Indiana Fever may have shown flashes of promise this season, but let's not confuse sparks with a steady flame, and certainly not with a championship fire, because right now this team, despite the hype, despite the momentum, despite the generational talent of Caitlin Clark, is not even close to being a legitimate championship contender. And no, this isn't a knee-jerk reaction or some emotional meltdown over a single bad game. This is the result of watching pattern after pattern repeat itself like clockwork. The core issue? This team doesn't play defense. Not a lick of it. Every single game, whether against playoff teams or lottery squads, the Indiana Fever consistently get torched in the paint, outmuscled inside, and exposed in transition, and the worst part is, it's expected now. Opponents walk into matchups knowing they'll get layup lines and live action play. Interior defense is non-existent. Teams don't need to rely on outside shooting against the Fever because the paint is a revolving door, and that alone should disqualify any talk of this roster being close to contending. You can't win in the WNBA or any high-level basketball league if you can't stop anyone. No defensive foundation means you have to be perfect defensively, and that's exactly the hole this team keeps digging for itself. Every single game plan feels like a gamble that Caitlin Clark is going to score 30-plus points, that Kelsey Mitchell is going to be in rhythm, and that Aaliyah Boston is going to bulldoze her way to 20 and 10 without getting in foul trouble. But even when that happens, and yes, it has happened, they still lose. Why? Because the other team scores too. And when the Fever hit that inevitable cold streak in the third or fourth quarter, when shots stop falling and they stop running sets that worked earlier, there is no defensive fallback. They can't get a stop to save themselves. Their entire structure collapses the moment the offense isn't pristine. Look at the recent game against the Las Vegas Aces. Clark had a rough shooting night, sure, but despite that, the Fever still had a double-digit lead in the first half. Why? Because they were running a simple, effective offensive set that worked like magic. The pick and roll between Clark and Boston. Every time they ran it, it produced a good look, either Boston rolling into space or Clark drawing enough gravity to bend the defense. But did they keep running it? No. They ran it once, then abandoned it for the next 5 possessions. And it's the same story every game. When something works, they inexplicably stop doing it. The Clark-Boston pick and roll is the most reliable tool they have, and yet they rarely run it back-to-back. Why? Why is there ever a play where Caitlin Clark brings the ball up, passes it, and then stands in the corner or runs off some off-ball screen only to get the ball back with 8 seconds left on the shot clock? That's not how you use a generational playmaker. That's not how you design an offense around your most valuable weapon. And then you see Kelsey Mitchell, one of the best off-ball scorers in the league, being forced to take pull-up jumpers instead of cutting off screens or catching defenders sleeping on backdoor actions. She was thriving in a stretch of the game, hitting clutch buckets, yet suddenly disappeared from the play calling. Aaliyah Boston dropped 18 in the first half and finished with 26. She was on pace for a career-defining performance, yet in the second half, she barely touched the ball. Why? Why does Stephanie White keep going away from what's working? It's not just questionable. It's sabotage. This team has patterns, not progression. The offensive sets are disjointed, relying too heavily on individual brilliance rather than systemized success. There's no rhythm, no consistency, no plan B when things get tight. The spacing disappears, the ball movement stops, and Clark is left to bail the team out in crunch time situations where the shot clock's expiring and the floor is cluttered. That is not an offense. That's panic disguised as strategy. And then there's the defense, again, the root of all these problems. Boston can't defend elite post players without fouling. That's just the reality right now. It's not all her fault either. The refs are brutal with her, often giving her fouls for just being physical, but at the same time, she does give them opportunities to blow the whistle. Natasha Howard? She's not the answer inside either. Too light, too soft, too slow. She's getting bullied inside, and her defensive IQ hasn't been anything close to what this team needs. DeWanna Bonner? Not the same player anymore. The idea of Bonner or Howard anchoring this team's interior has been a disaster. And as for players like Damiris Dantas or Temi Fagba, they have flashes defensively, but they don't get consistent minutes, and frankly, they don't fit well alongside Boston in the front court. The size and spacing becomes a problem, and White clearly doesn't trust those pairings enough to use them consistently. So what's left? Hope that Clark drops 40? That's the entire strategy. And it's a losing one. The offensive ceiling is high. Sure, Clark, Mitchell, and Boston can all put up numbers, but the floor is terrifyingly low because when one of them is off, especially Clark, the whole thing collapses. We've seen it time and again. Clark misses a few shots, the defense overloads on Boston, and suddenly nobody knows where the next basket is coming from. The offense becomes chaotic, and the defense isn't there to stop the bleeding. So, even if Clark and Mitchell combine for 55, the Fever might still give up 90 plus because Jonquil Jones or Aya Wilson just had a field day inside. And it's not just about stars either. Every team they play seems to have role players torching the Fever in the paint, on second chance points, and in fast breaks. It's painful to watch because the solutions are complex. Run the Clark-Boston pick and roll until the opponent proves they can stop it. Adjust with intelligent spacing and motion off that action. Play to Mitchell's strengths as an off-ball scorer. And for the love of the game, build some sort of defensive scheme that isn't just switching everything lazily or getting caught in soft help rotations. Look, nobody expected this team to win the title in Clark's rookie season, but there's a difference between rebuilding and regressing. And right now, this version of the Fever feels less cohesive and more confused than last season's late stretch. There's no identity. There's no killer instinct. There's no foundational toughness or discipline that says, this is how we win. And that's a failure on multiple levels: coaching, management, rotations, player development, accountability. They've. And right now, this version of the Fever feels less cohesive and more confused than last season's late stretch. There's no identity. There's no killer instinct. There's no foundational toughness or discipline that says, this is how we win. And that's a failure on multiple levels: coaching, management, rotations, player development, accountability. They've added the wrong veterans, misused their best players, and refused to stick with what works. That's how you waste talent. That's how you take a team with a once-in-a-generation player like Caitlin Clark and turn it into a treadmill of mediocrity. Yes, Clark will have better games. Yes, Boston will find ways to score even against aggressive coverages. Yes, Mitchell will hit big shots again. But none of it will matter until this team learns how to execute consistently, defend with pride, and trust in a system that maximizes its strengths instead of suppressing them. Until then, they'll be stuck where they are now, somewhere between entertaining and exhausting, talented and tragic, promising and perpetually underwhelming.
Presence with the balance of spacing and cutting and just efficient around the rim. And when she gets touches around the rim, she's going to put the ball in the hoop. So we're missing that.
It's honestly beyond frustrating at this point. There's a blueprint right in front of them, a cheat code that's been effective since last season, and yet the Indiana Fever still refuse to use it consistently. The pick and roll with Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston is literally the most reliable offensive set this team has, and it's not just reliable. It's unstoppable when run correctly. Every time Clark comes off a high ball screen, she either drags two defenders with her, creating an automatic numbers advantage, or she gets isolated for an easy three-point look. If the defense commits to her, Boston has a clear lane to the rim. If they sag back, Clark has the green light to pull up or manipulate the defense with her elite court vision. So the obvious question becomes, why not go to it every single possession? Why are we watching a Fever offense that insists on ignoring what works in favor of some misguided attempt to get others involved or to showcase team basketball at the expense of efficiency? Let's call it like it is. Either the coaching staff has no clue what they're doing, or they're intentionally trying to minimize Clark's central role so it doesn't appear like the entire team is reliant on her star power. And if it's the latter, it's a betrayal of competitive logic. Because the fact of the matter is, Caitlin Clark is the best player on this team by far. She's the only player who commands consistent double teams, the only player who shifts the gravity of the floor the moment she crosses half court. So if you have a weapon like that and you're trying to balance the offense by running her off the ball or having her touch the ball only once late in the shot clock, you're not trying to win. You're trying to make a political statement about parity and depth. And in doing so, you're throwing away winnable games. And that's what's really frustrating. These aren't just tough losses. They're games the Fever should have won. Against